Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming on board once again. I must appreciate everybody for always finding time to join the meeting. Today is going to be interesting. We have Jessica all the way from Cote d'Ivoire. She works with the African Development Bank. I'm sure a lot of us have read her profile when we put it up there. When we made it public. That we are currently very interested in is called Coding for Employment, and it's a platform that is a learning platform that contains a whole lot of learning content, I must say, and is one of the content that we're using for the Future of Jobs Africa project, for the collab phase of the project, where a participant get to be trained in also acquire skills in some of these areas. I wouldn't want to take much time. We've already spent about 15 minutes of our meeting time, but I just want us to, as usual, our presentation, she should go ahead and tell us, but we usually take after the presentation. So without further ado, Jessica, like I said, the audience, usually we have working professionals, people in government agencies, and those in the private sectors as well. We have people across Nigeria and in the US as well. I'm sure more of our regulars will join us in the course of the presentation. So without taking much time, Tika, please, the floor is now yours, and expect questions mostly at the end of your presentation. Thank you, Jessica.
All right, thank you so much, Shifo. So sorry for the mix-up with the technology. I hope you can hear me right. There's a little bit of
we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yes, so I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an honor. I have gone back to look at some of the presentations that we've had previously, like really engaging conversation, and I think maybe going forward I'll also become one of your regulars and be learning from people from around the world. So like you mentioned, my name is Jessica Muganza. I'm currently working as the Monitoring and Evaluation and Learning Lead for the Coding for Employment program, which is part of the Jobs for Youth in Africa strategy of the bank. I will, let me do this. Yes. So I think in terms of the presentation, we called it Africa Youth and Innovation Initiatives with the African Development Bank. I'm looking forward to discussing some of the initiatives that we've been working on, but especially the Coding for Employment program, which is the one I'm much more familiar with. But I can also kind of give an overview of some of the other programs. So let me do this. Yes. Right. So in terms of agenda, this is what I was thinking: an introduction, introducing you to the strategy, and then talking about the big elephant in the room right now, which is the COVID-19 pandemic and how it affects skills development, and then going in a little bit more on the Coding for Employment program. So in terms of just introductions and why I kind of landed in this field myself, or why I'm passionate, and I truly believe in the work that I'm doing at the bank. I think maybe many of you probably share this because you're here for this conversation. For me, education and skills development has always been this, it's kind of like the ticket to social mobility for people who are not born with any sort of, privileges or advantages. I think for me, it's kind of the great equalizer and probably the best gift we can give to every individual to be able to fully realize their lives. As we all know, obviously, we're born, we don't choose where we're born. And unfortunately, the way the world is, where you're born and the family you're born in often ends up influencing a lot of how your life goes, right? And education is just one of those things that often lets people be mobile and be able to attain greater potential what they were born with. And for me, that has been the case. I think my passion for education started with myself being that example. When I was 17, I got this opportunity to attend a school called the African Leadership. I think someone's mic is on. Oh, it's maybe, yes, okay. I got to attend this school called the African Leadership Academy in South Africa. It was like an end of high school, the last 2 years of high school, and I can positively say that it changed my life because it kind of gave me a different perspective on what education could be. So I'm from Rwanda originally. I had been schooled in Rwanda my whole life. Follow the curriculum. I'm sure this is true in Nigeria, true elsewhere. You know, the formula: learn. If you get good grades, you'll get a good job, which by now we all know that to some extent, doesn't always pan out, right? But also the type of skills that we learn, many of us, at least I know, that I often struggled with: how is this going to serve me in my life? But at this school, the school had a really particular approach to education, which was about infusing entrepreneurship and leadership in whatever we were learning in class. And that kind of changed my outlook on education. And then my next outlook then was: how do we make this not just a school for 100 people, 200 people? How do we make sure that all African youth actually have this type of opportunities to be able to fully realize their lives? So I would give that as an introduction, and how in my own background I ended up where I am. So this for me is a really interesting forum, but also yes, looking forward to hearing your views on this, especially on how the current pandemic that we're living is kind of reinforcing some of these things that I just mentioned, reinforcing some of the disadvantages that we find in the world as it is set up for now. All right, so I'll move on. The Jobs for Youth in Africa strategy. Why did the bank, which is traditionally known for working in infrastructure, roads, energy, those kind of projects, why did we now turn our eyes to look now at this question of jobs for youth? And the reason really is because it's becoming more and more apparent that, like I said, the formula of go to school, if you get good grades, you get a good job, it's really not working. The statistics go something like, for every 11 million African youth joining the job market every year, only 3 million of them will actually get a formal gainful employment, whereas the other 8 million will then end up most probably underemployed in the informal sector, with no particular, they don't have any job safety, they don't have any sort of what am I trying to say, safety nets that will then kind of launch them into a more productive life, and the ability to be able to get gainful employment. So that's something that it's not just one country facing this, it's across the continent, across the world really. But this is more pronounced also for us because our youth population is growing. So it's not a population that we can ignore. And I think there's also this aspect of, young people are now connected to the rest of the world. They can see what the other opportunities for others in other continents, in other contexts are. So this raises the aspiration of everybody. And now, they have access to see this is how the other half lives, but they don't have half the opportunities to be able to realize that for themselves. And this then becomes, you see here, for instance, this girl said, when you receive an internship, the first thing they tell you is to forget everything you learned at school. A university doesn't mean anything in real life. So it's almost like these young people are living in some sort of matrix, right? They're told the world is one way, and then all of a sudden they get in the world of work. Either it's like, forget everything you've learned, you're going to just, learn something new. Or so then they're like, what's the point? What's the point of, putting so much effort and then getting such little out of it, right? So the bank then launched this Just for Youth in Africa strategy. This was in 2016. And part of it was a response, obviously, to this growing youth unemployment challenge. It's everywhere. We saw the examples of in the Arab Spring, a lot of the youth who were protesting, for instance, were also protesting the lack of opportunity, right? And this is not just there, across the continent. Like I said, this is something that we keep seeing. So instead of just investing in infrastructure and physical things, the bank then realized that it is as important, if not more, to focus on our human capital. Our human capital is going to be vital. It's going to be, as the world itself kind of goes into this knowledge economy, the human capital aspect is going to be even more pronounced, right? So what's the goal of this strategy? The strategy itself, the aim is to create 25 million jobs for African youth and equip 50 million of them with skills that will be relevant to them so this is in the form of internship, apprenticeships, actual education and whatnot. So all of that, this is really what this strategy aims to achieve by 2025. So it was kind of a 10-year strategy. And how then does this strategy reach those numbers? The strategy has three main pillars. The first one is integration, then there's innovation and investment. The integration aspect looks, first of all, internally at the bank's own projects, like the kind of projects that we fund, right? So are we putting our money where our mouth is in terms of empowering young people, right? So, for instance, if the bank gives out projects that are about $7 billion every year, what's the percentage of that goes towards providing opportunities to young people, directly or indirectly? So this then prompts us to look at youth employment as kind of a core requirement in any type of project we're doing, be it agriculture, energy, any kind of project. How are we making sure that for every dollar spent, there's a certain percentage that goes towards young people, not like direct funding, but in terms of we're going to create, if it's a road project, how do we make sure that we are giving opportunities to young engineers or young entrepreneurs who are going to create kind of entrepreneurial opportunities around the building of the road in terms of like secondary employment around that particular project. So this particular pillar then again looks at every single project that the bank puts out. How do we make sure that we're actually thinking of youth in every single one of this? It also looks at the policies, the kind of policies that countries themselves enact. For instance, local content laws. For many of our projects, if you're talking procurement, young people who maybe have put together a business and want to do some tenders, participate in some tenders, find themselves often on the lower end because maybe they don't have experience, maybe they're not the ones who have the lowest prices. But with policies such as local content laws, then you make sure that you're pro-youth, you're actually giving them the opportunities to be able to participate in some of these tenders. So that's that pillar. The second pillar is around innovation. In this one, the thinking is, even if governments all around Africa were to do their best to give everyone the right kind of skills and link them to employers, there are just not enough jobs on the market for every single young person right now. Our private sector has not developed so much that every single person will be absorbed into the labor force, right? Into the labor market. So then this calls for new ways of thinking. How do we then, use entrepreneurship and innovation to create new opportunities? Youth themselves being able to create opportunities for themselves and for their peers. And for this particular pillar, the bank then looks at some of the flagship programs. I will mention them in the next slide. But before I go there, let me also talk about the investment pillar. And this is something you hear a lot. Young people always, or at least most often, complain that they have very little access to finance, even when you have a good idea, even when you have a job opportunity. Sometimes the financing aspect becomes a problem. So how do we make sure that we're investing in young people's skills? And this also, I will mention some of the flagships that work towards this. And in terms of what kind of sectors we are focusing on as a bank in this particular strategy, it's the agriculture, industrialization, and ICT sectors. And these three have been chosen because we consider them to be kind of high growth potential in terms of jobs. We think that the agriculture industry and ICT sectors are kind of able to absorb or have the potential to absorb as many youth as possible, hence the focus on these three. So in terms of the flagship programs that I was talking about, so one of them is this one called the Enable Youth Program. This one looks to support young people and incubates the scaling up of their agribusinesses. So they basically target young people who might have maybe gone to school for law or any of these other professions that are kind of having a hard time being filled, right? And for instance, if you're a lawyer, you went to school, you completed your degree, but you cannot find employment. This particular program almost looks at empowering this type of young people to become agripreneurs, so agricultural entrepreneurs. How do they look at agriculture not as something that's archaic that people in the rural area do, but as a real opportunity for them to be able to create businesses? So this is for instance, like in the agricultural agribusiness value chain, it's not just the actual raw, agriculture, but agricultural processing, packaging, all of these other, value addition that can be put on agricultural products. How can these young people take advantage of this of this market? So this is what this particular program does, and I think every year they hold something, an agri pitch, where they kind of look at some of the most innovative programs coming out from young people in agribusiness and provide them with incubation and further support. Another flagship program is the Rural Micro Enterprise Program, and this one focuses on those youth who are actually in the rural areas who need to launch agricultural micro enterprises. We still have such a huge amount of young people who are actually not in the cities, but actually in the rural areas and who are practicing agriculture. How do we make sure that they actually become more productive in this field? The third one I would mention is the Skills Enhancement Zone program. And this one then, as you can see, it focuses on industry. We know that some of the industries are unable to find the right kind of skill because, again, some of the skills are not necessarily taught, that they're not necessarily taught immediately in school. Therefore, there needs to be some level of work-based learning. So this is the kind of program that this particular flagship focuses on. How do we give youth demand-led training and then link them to industry clusters, right? So maybe it's the textile industry, maybe it's the food processing industry, but how do we make sure that they have the right skills and are able to be absorbed in these different clusters? And then in terms of investment, like I was saying, there's these two programs. One of them is called the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Lab. And this one is particularly looking at the type of, I would say, information asymmetries, right? The fact that young people who have good ideas are unable to connect maybe with the right incubators and the right accelerators or the right peers to be able to put together their minds and make it something bigger. So this Entrepreneurship and Innovation Lab really hones in on that. So it's a platform. It's actually going to be an actual platform where young people can come and be able to find peers and resources to grow their entrepreneurial ventures. And the last one is the Youth Entrepreneurship and Innovation Trust Fund. And this one is particularly geared towards kind of helping incubators and accelerators become really strong so that they can be able to assist young people who need their services. We know that there's been recently like a boom of incubators and accelerators across the continent. Some of them, I mean, the definition varies. You know, it could be a co-working space and they'll call it like an incubator or an accelerator, but some of the essential work in order to reach as many entrepreneurs as possible, kind of reinforcing these intermediaries or these enterprise support organizations, as we call them, is key to be able to create a pipeline of entrepreneurs who then, create the right kind of jobs and entrepreneurial ventures, which will lead to growth in jobs. All right. So COVID-19 and its impact on skills development. I mean, this pandemic has really kind of been very devastating, as you can imagine. And as you probably can observe around you, even in your own respective countries, we see that on top of just leading to so much lockdown, so much shock across the economies, the largest burden of the pandemic actually falls on the disadvantaged. So people who are low income, women, people who are disabled, all of these people who are poor, have so much more disadvantage from this COVID-19. For instance, we know that the effect on women, for instance, who are working now, who have to be at home and handle at the same time their jobs and also the work at home simultaneously. It almost like has set back the movement for women at work, and may unfortunately lead to so many women deciding to kind of drop out of the labor market. The other kind of aspect that has been very, very hit by this pandemic is the education, the education sector. So school closures across continents. Basically, 1 in 6 young people have stopped working since COVID, and 73% of youth in schools and universities have interrupted their learning. Countries are now speaking of a dead year for education, basically like let's scrap 2020 and you have to restart. But that means for all these young people who are in school, means loss of learning, it means loss of opportunities. And for those who were done with learning and who are now advancing towards trying to integrate the labor market, many of them who had lined up internships and apprenticeships, many of these have obviously now been cancelled or postponed because of this pandemic. And the other risk to this is that now that many of these young people are actually at home, the risk for dropping out has increased a lot, right? So if you're already kind of part of a family that maybe does not see why you should be in education, and you're at home for 6 months and you're helping, with the farming and all these other aspects, the argument to go back to school is actually going to be much harder to make after this school closure period is over, right? So there is this risk that a lot of young people who were kind of in school, but with so many disadvantages, are now going to just kind of drop out and interrupt their learning indefinitely, right? And this all kind of leads to this question of how do we avoid having a lockdown generation, right? Um, it's kind of an unfortunate term, but it's kind of been flying in all these policy dialogues, webinars, everywhere. But there is it basically kind of brings the point that it's not going to be just a one-year thing, that the effect of this pandemic might be felt throughout the whole generation, that it's not something that we are going to, maybe like by 2030 we'll kind of have forgotten that this existed. The remnants of the pandemic, unfortunately, is going to keep being part of our future, unfortunately. Yeah. And then the other aspect that I wanted to mention is also the loss of working hours and income. So for people who are in employment, many of them, like I said, a lot of young people are at risk in their jobs. You find that maybe they're not unemployed because obviously they need to put something on the table. So many of them might have taken jobs that are very precarious, but at this point, there is a loss of even those working hours that they had in that precarious, maybe informal sector, right? Because of the lockdown, you have to stay at home. In many countries, this has been implemented, and that means that if I cannot go, in Kenya, for instance, they call them juakalis. If you're kind of this laborer who's outside and always going to just wait for the next day to know what your work is actually going to consist of exactly, that is something that's taken away from you. And that's something that's actually affecting people today because they don't know what they're going to eat tomorrow. And many of these people are obviously, like I'm saying, young people. All right. So after painting that kind of gloomy picture, but unfortunately realistic, what is then going to be kind of our response, or what's going to change with this COVID pandemic? So one of the things that we need to look at going forward is really this aspect of strengthening the path from school to work and increasing work-based learning. Certainly the path from school to work comes from the fact that if it's a demand and supply consideration that we're making, the supply in terms of young people, I just kind of described how this has been affected in terms of the loss of learning. But on the other hand, businesses are also really suffering. Many of them are, firing people, which means that there needs to be at least policy considerations towards strengthening this aspect of how we're going to get the young people who are now going to finish up school into work, given the current environment that we're in. And one aspect is also this aspect of work-based learning. As we go forth, we're realizing that this practical learning on the job is going to be more and more important. So how do we make sure that we are actually reinforcing that? The second point I wanted to make is that unfortunately this might not be the last crisis or shock that the world goes through in the next coming years. How are we going to then not take this as a one-time thing, but support the young people to be resilient and adaptable to any kind of future shocks that might be lying in the future? And one way to respond to that is through digital learning, right? How do we then make sure that we're taking the cue from this pandemic and accelerate digital learning and digital transformation? And it's not just about willing to saying, okay, we're going to accelerate digital learning, but it really is about how do we provide the right environment? How do we make sure that young people, especially again, the most disadvantaged, have access to devices, have access to the internet? Because right now there are some countries who still have some, like social media tax in Uganda, for instance, or all of these other hurdles that young people have to go through in order to reach, to be able to even reach the digital learning. So this is kind of going to be like a more and more pronounced aspect. It's not going to just be like this like short-term fix, let's all go online, but everything is going to go back to normal. It's more like, this is the new way, or at least a blended approach, which is some digital learning and some on-site, is going to kind of be useful as we go forward. And then the other aspect is to look at this new normal that COVID is creating. This kind of, how do we, when we create this new normal after COVID, how do we make sure that it's better, but the most disadvantaged people are getting the blunt of this crisis? How do we increase this aspect of equal access to opportunity, right? There's this thing where we are all kind of, again, it links back to what I was saying about access. We are all kind of excited about this fourth industrial revolution, but for some people, even things like electricity and access to an actual computer is still a problem. So this leap to now a fourth industrial revolution, a digital revolution, is almost kind of skipping some other phases, right? So that's also something to keep in mind. And lastly, this aspect of rethinking education for the new type of worker, right? Basically, this pandemic is kind of making us rethink this whole aspect of 9 to 5, right? Or you have to be in the office and have a supervisor, therefore you're going to then do your work. It might be that now it's going to be, a matter of you're working from home. It's not going to be about the amount of time that you put into the work, but more like what have you brought, the actual outcome, the impact, right? And this then means that we have to now think about aspects of like social, like soft skills, right? Like self-leadership, self-discipline, being able to set out, I'm going to do this work and be able to finish this project. Working in teams is going to be a bit more challenging, because you're not in the same place. How are you then going to handle this aspect? And many of this is not currently taught in our education systems. And this is something that needs to come out strongly. The other aspect is like the type of education, or how education is done, is going to change. Going to college for 4 years versus taking some classes online. This new generation is kind of rethinking that. Why do I have to pay so much money and invest so much time when I can get a shorter training that will then, allow me to join the labor market quicker and be able to take care of myself? So these are all, aspects of that COVID that already existed. The this digital transformation was kind of underway, but COVID has kind of accelerated it and kind of made it, full center for all of us. All right. I don't know if I'm managing my time right. How many minutes do I have left?
I just keep going. You still have good time unless
All right. All right. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So this kind of goes back to that. How are we now going to think of working smart instead of working hard? So this kind of brings me straight into the conversation about the Coding for Employment program. So this program is really a response to many of the stuff that I just mentioned. This rapidly evolving ecosystem where technology is disrupting our everyday life, redefining how we do products, how we do services, and then also in parallel, the fact that the continent itself has poor infrastructure when it comes to technology and the digital economy. How do we make sure that young people actually have access to the devices and to an environment that's enabling for them to be able to absorb this new kind of learning? And thirdly, this aspect of an outdated training curriculum. What we're teaching today is not fit for what will be needed tomorrow for this new type of worker that I was talking about. So how do we make sure that we're doing what we call demand-driven skilling, right? And then by doing that, we'll then be addressing these skills mismatches and skills gap that we see in the market even today. Okay. Yes. So how does the program itself work? I would kind of go into it quickly. This diagram shows, the methodology or how we go about, how we went about setting up this program. I would say that we have three main pillars to the Coding for Employment program. The first one is the establishment or the operationalization of centers of excellence. And for us, this is important because, again, it goes straight to the heart of the problem that I was saying, that if we want to reach young people who are unemployed, who have lesser opportunity, we have to think about creating an enabling environment. That aspect of, like, you can't tell people, pull yourselves by the bootstraps, but they don't even have boots, right? You need to make sure that even the basics are available for them to be able to make the most out of that opportunity. And for us, the basics is being able to have an environment where they have access to devices, access to electricity and internet in order to facilitate their learning. Then the second aspect is on demand-driven training, right? And this one, again, goes back to everything that I've been mentioning, and focuses on three different aspects, because we know young people, not all of them are ready to become, coders or, data scientists and all that. Because, again, that aspect or that principle of inclusivity makes us think of the young people, even in the informal sector, who've never, had access to a computer. How do we prioritize? We kind of look at it like a pyramid, some kind of pyramid where the base is basic digital literacy for young people. And this one is for everyone, right? Youth in the informal sector, young women and mothers who are maybe at home or who are even, themselves in the informal sector. How do we make sure that young people have access to basic digital skills, which will help them become more productive, but also which will help them, we know that some of the governments are becoming more and more digital, some of the government services. For instance, in Rwanda, where I come from, there's now a government portal where you can get the majority of services, even getting like a birth certificate or a marriage certificate, or getting your scores for an exam that you did, requires some level of interaction, right, with, digital tools. So how do you make sure that these people are not marginalized or further, excluded from this conversation as we kind of look towards this fourth industrial revolution? So that was kind of like the basic skills. The next level to that is what we call intermediate skills. And this is then going to be for young people who don't want to just kind of know the basics, but who are actually interested in, advancing their skills in ICT. And then the last bit is now advanced ICT skills. And this is for young people who have already a good base of ICT skills and want to specialize in aspects that are really important and also look, promising in the context that they're in the labor market where they are. This could be things like I was saying, data science, could be AI, it could be cybersecurity, any, it could also be entrepreneurial, digital entrepreneurship, because this is also another aspect. But for us, when we look at those three different aspects, which we call technical skills, but to double on that, we now also emphasize a lot on soft skills, right? So as you can see on this diagram, when we started doing this program, we started by doing feasibility studies. And this was to be able to identify centers that can be partners with us. But we also at the same time, because of this aspect of demand-driven skilling, we wanted to talk to the private sector. And when we went to different private sector employers, most of the things that they said wasn't, oh, these people don't know how to do the technical work. It was mostly on the soft skill side, right? So do these people come on time? Are these people able to work in teams? Are these people, do they have communication and presentation skills? These were kind of the things that kept coming back, and that kind of also goes in line with a lot of research coming out that some of these aspects of soft skills, like critical thinking or being able to be adaptable and flexible in your work, are becoming more and more important, and then again are going to be important even as we face future shocks. So across the board, be it for basic, intermediate, and advanced levels of skilling, what we call soft skills, employability skills, and entrepreneurship is kind of a running thread, almost like a cross-cutting section, in skilling of these three different types of target groups, right? So that's number two. The third pillar of the coding for employment is linking young people to employment. We know that this is often the biggest bottleneck. There's so many people who are qualified or who are looking, and just this linking to employment has become, kind of the biggest bottleneck, like I was saying. So how do we make sure that we are exposing them as much as possible to employers, be it by on kind of their own side, helping them in their own personal growth to be able to present themselves as the best candidate possible, but also to be able to look at opportunities, be it like remote work or actual apprenticeships, internships that might get them into jobs later. So all of this is kind of the three of these aspects mashed together is what makes the Coding for Employment program. And so we started operation in 2018, we launched. We started operating in 2019. And so far, we've been able to train about 2,000 young people. We started in 5 countries, 5 pilot countries, and that is Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, Senegal, and Cote d'Ivoire. And one of the aspects that we've been able to do is do training of trainers across these 5 countries so that we can enable facilitators at the partner institutions that we work with to be able to deliver this even after our program leaves. So this kind of talks towards sustainability, right? We want to be able to provide those skills and have them stay even if our program itself actually does not stay in that school. And to be able to do this, obviously the bank is not a technology company. We're not going to be the ones to determine what the curriculum would look like. So what we do is that we work in collaboration with technology companies who are versed in this, who've been able to do this across the continent and beyond, and be able to partner with them so that we know that the skills that we're providing are actually demand driven and are going to be relevant to the job market. So far we've been able to work with Microsoft, And we work also with LinkedIn at the moment, and we've talked to a couple others. So we are always kind of rooting for getting more of these partners on board, but not only international organizations, but also local employers, because we know this is where the jobs are going to come from people who are in the local markets. What else can I say on this? I think that kind of gives the overview. The one thing that I wanted to share is also, we realize that by doing only on-site training, we're not going to be able to reach the numbers that we want. And this is where this aspect again of digital training comes in. And you were mentioning our Coding for Employment or e-learning platform. I wanted to, let me see if I can be able to walk you through what that looks like. Let's see.
Uh, can anyone
Uh,
hear me? Everything
yes,
stopped. Hope it's not.
don't worry,
Okay.
you're still on. I
Okay.
think just to get okay, she's back.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right,
I thought it
Jessica.
was my network.
No, it wasn't from your end. It was from our end. Jessica, you have to unmute your mic.
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry, I was looking for this website so I can show you in person the courses on this on our e-learning platform. So basically, a bunch of probably over 100 different ones. We partnered with Microsoft for this particular website for now, but we are in talks with other content providers to be able to increase this number of courses on our website. So some of the courses that are here, for instance, you see Build Your Business, this kind of falls into that aspect of um, employability. You can see different modules under that. The Microsoft Imagine Academy here, some of kind of we would call intermediate to advanced learning that young people can do on their own from home. And then Microsoft Digital Literacy, this is part of our basic our basic ICT training. So, all different, Microsoft Office tools. And then I think we also have, yes, Microsoft Story Labs. And this aspect I find very interesting because, again, many of the young people we are talking to, this aspect of mentorship and kind of figuring out what your next step is difficult to get across because most likely that their parents or the people they know are not working in this field. So how do we even digitally kind of expose to them different people who are using digital skills in different industries, be it music, be it graphic design, being as engineers. So by being exposed to these different uses of technology, it kind of allows them to dream bigger and see how far they can take their own futures. The aspect, and then many other more, Minecraft, of course, and then some soft skills like resume writing, how to go after your dream job. And then we have both English and
Oh, you mistakenly stopped sharing, Jessica, and you also muted yourself. Yeah,
Okay,
so you have
great.
to finish sharing again.
Is that better? That's better, right?
Yeah, I can hear you, but we don't see the content any longer.
Yeah, no, I stopped sharing it because
Okay.
I'm actually more or less done, and I wanted to just give some time for any kind of discussion and Q&A.
Perfect.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to do actually was to share with you an example of one of our beneficiaries. I'm gonna try to play a video. Hopefully it's gonna work. Try that. Can you hear?
Yes, we can.
We can. Yeah, we can.
My name is Odedola Olashilelo Apelumi. I came from University of Ibadan, student of Communication and Language Arts. It's really difficult for you to get a job here in Nigeria. I've gone for different interviews, but the longer they just get something to disqualify you, and that's it. I got to know about Code for Employment program from a church platform. I've been seeing different posts about technology, but I just said I should try this one. And here we are today. It has really paid off. As a result of the program, I was able to learn productivity tools. I've been able to use them efficiently, and that's helped my communication skills. The learning environment was conducive. The lecturers are they exposed us to the post at every point in time. Before the program, I was helping my husband manage his farm. The training has been beneficial to me. A nursing mother with no family, but now I've been able to work remotely from home with my company, and I do labeling annotation for them. It has helped me to be able to support the family. I'm really, really grateful for this Code for Employment program. It's a really big one, and I don't want it to stop with me. I want it to be extended to other people so they can be beneficiaries from it.
Okay. So yes, I think that's it for me.
Okay, Jessica, I just want to say thank you for the insight into what the bank is currently doing for people in Africa, all the initiatives, and as well as giving us insight into the Code for Employment. I have a better understanding of it now. I only have been able to go online. I discovered it online, and I went through the content, and I found out that the content is loaded, it's rich, and I decided that for future jobs project that we're running currently, that's going to be one of the learning platforms we're going to use. And immediately we put it up there. People have signed up. I must say that I am surprised that about 45% out of the 3 learning platforms that we're using, 45% of signage or sign up have been for the coding for employment platform.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of persons have questions right now. Maybe I should just go ahead and ask mine first before I throw the floor open, because I know when questions start rolling in, it's going to be an engaging session till we close. What I'm particular about is that I think I shared this with you on that the content is quite rich, but the visibility or the mileage of awareness a little bit on the low side. And from your presentation, I found out that, and also when I did some background research or checked around the project, I discovered that you're currently partnering with institutions, I think 4 of them in Nigeria, if I'm correct. And you know, personally, I feel that's not adequate, because the universities are a little bit far from a lot of your target audience. So what are your plans to engage private entities, non-profit organizations in order to reach out to the audience? Because I feel the non-for organizations and private organizations such as ours tend to reach out to the target audience more than the universities.
Yes.
That's my question. Some more will come.
Great, it's a great question, and I think you're right. So launched this. Let me just first talk about the online platform. We launched it in December of last year, so this was the end of last year, and we've actually seen a lot of usage lately, especially in these 3 months of this 3 months, 3 to 4 months of COVID. At this point, we're at like 18,000 users who are on the platform and taking courses. Whereas before COVID, I think we were hovering around, I think 5,000 or something like that. So we definitely see the use and also the kind of the hunger from young people to be part of this, right? And I think we've maybe spent a lot of time also trying to put as much content there so that it's a rich platform, like you're saying, which makes me happy that you find it very, very, very useful, and being able to make it as accessible as possible. For instance, one of the things that we're working on right now is being able to make it into a mobile application so young people can use it even on their phones, because we know there are many young people who have access to phones as devices, but not really computers, right? So that's one thing that we really want to push for, because that will also allow them to be able to download something when they're where the internet is and be able to follow it when they're at home. And the platform itself is also low bandwidth. It's purposely created to kind of not have so much extra things going on, but just the most important thing, which is the content itself. And in terms of our approach, so I completely agree with you. So like I said, this is a pilot. It's a pilot program for us. So when you hear pilot, you hear learning, right? So when we started, our approach was, how do we reach as many people as possible using little resources? So one of the aspects that we considered is, like you said, partnering with institutions, be it university or TVET institutions, who then kind of act as hosts, who will house kind of our centers of excellence and act as hosts for young people even in the community, right? So having being able to reach out beyond the student population, right, who for the most part already have some sort of access to devices. But as we, like you mentioned, as we kind of grow this, we've kind of actually seen a bunch of different models that we should be following, given the feedback that we see on the ground. For instance, there's some universities. This is in the case of universities in Senegal, for instance, who consider that they have the devices. So the program itself, like I said, is 3 things. It would provide some sort of equipment and devices, the training, and then linkages to jobs. But some of the universities came out and said, what's most important? Maybe it's not the devices, because we already have that part covered, but how about you support directly some of our initiatives to reach out to the community? So that's one model, right? How do we actually then look at what they already have, diagnose actually what they need, and provide some catalytic support, be it in providing them with training, trainers, just to reinforce what's already existing. Because again, for us, ownership, local ownership and sustainability is something that's constantly on our mind. But the other aspect is also this aspect of what we would call almost like digital ambassadors, right? Like you said, there's so many organizations, NGOs, even individual youth groups who've reached out to us, even who've been part of our own trainings. Like there's this girl, for instance, in Gombe State in Nigeria, who after going through her own training has endeavored on her own without any kind of funding or, direction from us to then take this kind of training back to like high schools or young people in her community. And she's been able to train girls across her area in Gombe State. And when we see this, then we realize, this can be done in multiple ways than, like more ways than one, the initial one. So we are considering this very, very, very seriously. How do we make sure that we can allocate some catalytic support towards organizations like yourself? And we have so many other people who reach out to us because they resonate with the mission of this program, and to be able to then partner. And part of being able to provide the online platform was that, right? Because we would have people reaching us from different countries other than the 5 we're working in, right? Saying we want to be part of this program, but we wouldn't, have the mandates to actually go into their countries and be able to provide that support. So our first step was providing this e-learning platform for it to be almost like a uniform training that could already be helping people like yourselves who are looking to train young people. And now the next part is, how do we now provide, again, what I call catalytic support? Look at the aspects where we can come in and make your activities a bit more, amplify them further. Because again, you are the ones who know the youth in the community. You're the ones who are working them day to day. So that's a really important voice that increasingly and going forward, we want to be able to support more and more. So yeah, definitely.
I have a question. Can I jump in?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for your excellent presentation. You have captured a lot of things that I'm sure time won't permit us to cover everything. I want to start back by the last question with regard to extend your programs. I hope you will be able to make it available through this medium when that opportunity comes, so that those of us who are hoping to explore that will be able to have access to that. Now, having said that, I want to go back to the flagship program that you mentioned.
Yes.
One of the things you observe is projects or ideas that individuals have. Now, what do you have in place to allow young flagship programs to access to funding? I mean, not just on the books that there are access to funding, but makes it available and easy to access, avoiding all bureaucracy. Because we know that we keep hearing there are funding with African Development Bank, but how do you access it?
Yeah. It's a very interesting question, and completely valid, because like you said, many people hear there's funding, but it just feels like a rumor. So I completely get that. So the youth entrepreneurship and innovation funding that I mentioned, trust fund that I mentioned earlier, is meant to be able to channel this kind of funding to entrepreneurs. But unfortunately, this is not immediate, like it's going from the bank to the actual entrepreneur. This is why I mentioned these enterprise support organizations, so the incubators and accelerators. So whatever work this Youth Entrepreneurship and Innovation Trust Fund is going to be able to fund is kind of going to be funneled through this enterprise support organization. And I mean, maybe some aspects of this are, you know, the fact that there's so many young people who need who need funding, right? But how do we, because again, like I said, we're always kind of looking, how do you create the most good possible, right? To using, you know, looking at the resources as limited as first to be able to create this almost like an umbrella, right? Where we're able to give like money to an incubator or an accelerator and have them almost like, again, amplify that through the young people that they help. Because one aspect I know is that, for instance, even with the Enable Youth program that I talked about of agricultural entrepreneurs, some of them, even when you get funding, some of them lack, and I'm not trying to, you know, put the onus on the young people in any way. It's just, you know, how the system is set up for a young person might have a great idea, but really lack the, you know, the mentorship around how to create a team, how to manage even the resources that they get to be able to grow them into something bigger. And in our opinion, helping this enterprise support organization, like strengthening them, making these incubators and accelerators actual incubators and accelerators, not just, you know, or we put some tables around, this is a working space, therefore we're an incubator, but giving them as much, you know, capacity as possible to be able to grow these businesses, right? So it's a pipeline. So even when we then talk about investing and investors coming in to look at these entrepreneurs, you know, they're not kind of starting from scratch, because again, we know the problem of enterprises dying so fast in our ecosystems, right? We like, there's all these statistics about how, you know, startup survival rates are really low, and part of the reason is this lack of support and mentorship around how to build your business to make it viable. You know, go from just a concept to almost capital. They're ready to go to market. They're ready to be able to talk to an investor. So I think those are the aspects that we are focusing on right now. In the agriculture flagship that I talked about, for them, they do, I think, direct pitches. So they actually, like I said, every year invite young people to participate in this pitch. The ones that they then kind of taken through a process of incubation and further support to be able to grow their businesses. But I think this is a very it's still kind of one of those things that people like yourself need to keep asking institutions like the bank, because it's a constant reminder that, you know, how do we make sure that this money is actually funneling down to the people it was destined to get to. Another program that's trying to address this is the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Lab that I mentioned. Recently, they actually did, I'm not sure if you saw this Africa versus virus challenge. So when COVID broke out, they actually put this big hackathon, 72-hour hackathon together, and brought a community of, I think, around like 15,000 people together to brainstorm of solutions for Africa when it comes to COVID, right? But again, 15,000 people, how do you, you know, make sure that this is like a lot of ideas, right? How do you funnel them down to the ones that are like the most valuable and support those? I think programs like this Innovation Lab are going to be able to provide that kind of, you know, that kind of management, or they're almost like a connector, if I can call it that, right? So if it's a platform where you can be able to find information and resources on how to grow a business, find maybe co-founders and people who are thinking in the same line as you, or who are doing almost the same thing in a different country, and be able to speak to investors. I think this then creates, almost makes what you're saying like much more concrete, right? It's not just, oh, we're hearing rumors of money somewhere. It's, can this happen to me, as an individual? So yeah, I think that's what I would say on this.
A quick one before we ask a question. Could we just introduce ourselves? It would be nice, Jessica, to at least have an understanding or a better kind. So please introducing yourself before you go ahead with your question. Thank you.
Myself, I apologize, I didn't do that. My name is Moses Dachen. I live in Arlington, Texas. I am from Nigeria, and I have passion to go back home. So
yes, great. So welcome.
Okay, Moses, nice to meet you and welcome to the house.
Hello.
Hi, Bernard.
Yes, this is Bernard.
Bernard, yeah.
Thank you, Jessica. By way of introduction, I work for the Nigerian government agency responsible for information technology development and regulation. It's called the National Information Technology Development Agency. That's a mouthful. Need that for short. And I'm responsible for the e-government function.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I find your presentation quite interesting. For me, I don't think that the questions would do. I think it has provided a very nice platform for us to carry out a prolonged conversation.
Yeah.
Beyond this night, and I look forward to that. When I looked at your job role, you're responsible for monitoring and evaluation, which brings me to one of the areas that I'll be interested in. Since this is a pilot project, the ones that we are working with a lot of some universities, particularly in Nigeria, I will be interested to know the outcomes of that pilot phase, the challenges that you have encountered in during the implementation. Will be quite interesting. But to roll back to the point that you made earlier on, I just like to say that as much as we are developing the capacity of the youth to employ digital knowledge in job creation, I wonder if the bank is also thinking about the role of local governments. In this sense, I'm referring to the obvious need for local economies, because everybody resides in the community, and for the most part, when we talk about creating jobs and so on, they're looking at the central points or the major cities in the country. Yet the opportunities are there for youth to impact on their immediate communities, but because of the lack of capacity at the local government level, sometimes it's so like what you aim to achieve from initiatives like this end up living in a vacuum. So is that something that the bank has thought about or willing to to take on as a way of giving more value to this whole process and enabling stronger local economies as a complementary platform for the bigger picture.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Barnett. These are really good questions. I will start with the challenges. So when we went through this, I remember the first training that we organized, or at least I think one of the first few that we organized. We called for, we wanted to do a training for women, right? So all our advertising was like, young women, women entrepreneurs and young girls, we want to kind of provide some skills, ICT skills for entrepreneurs and for young women entrepreneurs and girls, right? So that was our working, that's who our target group was. And actually, one of the things that we realized, we had done our marketing, putting like a woman on the cover, all sorts of things. But when it came time to actually have the training, I think we had like 60% male attendance, like 40% women. And even as we were going through the training, you would find, because like a lot of what you were saying was, working groups, have someone present, your findings in a group. And lo and behold, who was presenting? It was the guys in the group, right? So I think for us, that, if I mentioned that as one of our challenges, that kind of was a wake-up call for us, because it was like, it's not just about saying, oh, we're doing this for women, and oh, by the way, here's, like a woman role model, please come. For us, it signified that this, the digital gender divide, but also just the divide in maybe mindset also of understanding the role of women in this ICT STEM sector was much more pronounced, really, right? And then we're also working in areas like Gombe State in Nigeria. This is an area that it has a very that a culture where young women often, they stay at home, they're very protected, all of this. So just being able to say, oh, come for training, you'll be in this co-ed setting, for training, all of that, was part of what was holding young girls back from participating. So for us, it necessitated that we take a hard look at what we were doing and be a bit more intentional, right, in attracting young women into this program, right? So for us, one of the things that we did was actually deciding that for every training cycle that we have, we will deliberately have a women cohort, a women-only cohort, right? We will have some co-ed, but we will still have a women-only cohort. We will encourage women facilitators, to be able to participate in this cohort. And also we'll be able to talk to the community leaders and influencers to explain, much more precisely what we were doing and why we needed young women to be part of it. Other aspects of this was to also realize that women have more hurdles to some extent, to be able to kind of come for a full day of training, right? They have homes, they have children. How are we accounting for the fact that they actually wouldn't have time to follow through, because many of them could come for one day and then they'll kind of be lost to follow up, right? Because they have to take care of their families. So all of this led us to kind of craft a program a women-only training program, which will then, be able to cater for some of this. You saw in the video that I showed that the lady who was part of the video, she was able to come to school with her kid, right? So we weren't, one of the things was to make women feel okay, like you can come with your child. We will have a facility where they can stay if you need to focus on the course. We will have flexible hours where, you know, if you can't come in the morning for the training, you can still catch up on it in the afternoon. So kind of building in this, you know, women-friendly, you know, aspects so that the program actually becomes more conducive to women. And in the end, now I think we have something like 46% women participation. We want this to be 50-50 because that's how it should be, right? But constantly looking at this as, you know, it's not a given that, you know, and it's not you know, the fact that do not participate equally is not just how things are. You know, there are reasons, there are underlying factors that make women, you know, less prone to participating in some of this training. So looking at that and actually being really deliberate in this aspect was one of the things that we did. Another aspect that's been challenging is, you know, how do you communicate expectations, right? For instance, like I just told you, you know, we give people, you know, we equip them with the skills, but the narrative is not going to be like, if you don't know how to use a computer this week, in 3 months, you'll be able to know how to use a computer, and then you'll get a job immediately at Microsoft or something. You know, people, like, there's this managing expectation aspect that needs to happen. But not only what you're doing, you know, it has to be ethical and it has to be realistic, and you have to communicate your what you're actually offering people clearly so that they can see the use of it in their lives, right? So for us, how we went about this is, you know how I mentioned we do technical skilling. It could be basic, intermediate, or advanced, but also soft skilling on the, you know, accompanying that, and entrepreneurial skilling. And for us, that aspect, even for people in the basic training, is very important, right? Because like you saw in the video, this lady was able to do remote work. So that's one aspect. But there's some people who maybe are not going to have that opportunity to do remote work and completely change everything that they're already doing in their lives. But maybe the conversation is less, oh, let me get a job in this digital field, but more like, how do I use these digital skills and productivity tools that I just learned to be able to increase my productivity even in my informal sector job, right? So we have examples, for instance, of people who, you know, are like craftsmen, right? And being able to go through basic training and, you know, have this whole introduction to the internet, it opens up doors even to be able to navigate things like Pinterest, for instance, right? And on Pinterest, if you're a carpenter, you can go there and find so many new models of things that you can, you know, of things that you can make. You know, you can increase your creativity. Or if you learn how to use Word and all these other tools, now you're not going to have to be running to someone else to be like, oh, maybe you can make me an invoice for my client, right? This is all kind of part of, it's not a matter, almost like the informal sector is here, right? It's the majority for the people, or, you know, in Africa. How do we kind of like not go like we have to formalize people and that's the only solution, but how do we increase their productivity even in their informality, right? So being able to communicate these aspects of how do these skills actually benefit you was also a really important aspect of our program. Then maybe the last challenge I would mention is this aspect again of linking people to jobs, because let's face it, it's hard, right? It's not as easy as you know, as it sounds, especially if you want to do it to a certain magnitude, right? So, and sometimes it seems to be a bit more, because these aspects of these aspects of skills mismatch and of employers, or even just the private sector itself being so small to not be able to absorb as many people, all of that is real. So then the solution there is, how do we now take advantage of this digital world we're living in, again, to expand beyond, the immediate context that our students find themselves in. Can they be able to train and be able to do work for someone in a different city in Nigeria, for instance, instead of just in the immediate area? So all of those things are, things that we kind of keep in mind, lessons learned. The other aspect is that, young people are hungry for this kind of training. Like, remember the first time we put out an application, I think we got like 15,000 people applying, but we were looking to train like 200. And this was in Nigeria. And this kind of like, hits you in the face, like, wow, like people actually need this. So how do we make sure that we expand access? That again is kind of like a really important point. How do we make sure that we're giving as many people an opportunity to participate? So those, I would say, are some of the challenges. In terms of, I like this question that you had about local government and increasing local capacity. I think for us, it's always been, like you said, this is a pilot program, but our ultimate goal, what we really want to prove to governments, right, and to people who come to borrow from the bank, is that borrowing or looking for a project from the bank to do human capital is just as important as saying, I want to borrow money to build a bridge, if not more important, right? But we don't have as many examples of this, right? People will, it's kind of hard to quantify or to show the results, because often it's not in 2 years that you have this fully formed, amazing experts from a project you just funded. It's not the same thing as building a road, because it's shiny, it's there, you see it, right? For people, it takes much longer. Like, it's almost like the incubation period of your investment is much longer. But how do we, this program to encourage or to show proof that this type of interventions work. And then when we go towards government, who are now thinking, I want to create a digital economy, I want to create a knowledge hub in my state or in my country, we actually have a concrete example of something that we can show them, which is not just like, oh, you're going to build this big techno park, but on top of building the buildings, this is how you can create a pipeline of actual talent that will power this knowledge economy that you're talking about, right? So that's really has been our goal and what we kind of want to go in the future. So beyond the countries where we're working, how do we expand that? And again, this also is about scalability, right? And the things that goes at the heart of what you were saying. It's not just for, like I said, 200 people that this needs to happen. We need to see it scaled, across as many people as possible. And to be able to do that, government, like you're saying, we have to build the muscle of the governments themselves to be able to carry this type of projects. So one of the things we are actually working on is digital skilling blueprint, and this is going to be almost like a practical tool or practical policy tools for leaders, policymakers, be it at national, state, city, local level, who are thinking of this as, as one of the projects that they want to take on, building human capital for the fourth industrial revolution, right? Or for this new digital economy. How do you go about it? How do you make sure that if this year, the majority of the people in your state are not, as advanced, how do you create strategies, that will then let you, be able to skill these people to a point where in 10 years, you're not encountering the same the same problem. So there's that aspect which is more on like towards policy dialogue and making governments consider this as much of a serious like make it look at it as something that has the same weight. But then when they decide to do that, when you have that political will, I think it then becomes much easier for them to say, you know what, we actually want funding instead of just a road. We actually want funding in building this community. So it kind of has to go in parallel. Yeah.
Quick one. I guess we with our questions and answer session, because I know there are lots of questions and I don't want guys to be mad at me for ending the meeting. So please, Jessica, you need to be able to snap in with a response as well. And those who are asking questions too, please, can we speed it up so that we don't get to end the meeting and a lot of people will be angry that they didn't have the opportunity to ask questions, because I know there are questions. And so please, we're already 1 hour 45 minutes, and usually we spend 1 hour 30 minutes or 1 hour 45 minutes at most. So please, let's be snappy with the questions and answer session. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah.
I also suggest that we post questions so that they may be answered even after the session.
Okay, this is what I'll do. Jessica, you're not on the group. We have a WhatsApp group. Maybe that we can continue the conversation even after this session.
No problem.
It's very important.
Please let new conversation from that end.
Okay. Any more questions?
Does that mean we don't have any more questions?
I think you just scared everyone away.
Okay, if there's no question, let me just add a dimension to the innovation that Jessica has talked about. Because sometimes, I'm speaking at someone who works for government, innovation needs to come from government as well. As much as we also reacting to the events in the marketplace, the public. So I'll give an example of how from my office, we kind of like one of the reactions that came from our organization to COVID. Okay, so the first thing that was quite noticeable across board was the inability of public servants to go to work. Right. Yeah, and that was exacerbated by the fact that much of government operation is still done through person-to-person interaction. Right. So digitalization is still low. The scale of digitalization is still low. Right. And so we felt that this was a problem. At the same time, an opportunity for us to accelerate the process of digitalization. Now, if you look at that process, the value chain, then you'll be able to identify opportunities for new jobs, new businesses, and so on. So the process of building capacity more often makes a lot of sense where you are. I think you mentioned this point earlier during your presentation. Targeting markets, whether existing or potential, right? So we found that the market for government technology is one of those areas that likely to provide opportunities as a response to COVID. So one of the projects we came up with was local outsourcing of government technology or government digital services. Now, for a long time now, for almost a decade and a half, Nigeria has been striving to compete with the likes of India in national outsourcing. Right? There's this idea that, look, we speak as much, if not better, English than India. We have a youthful population, and so there's no reason why Nigeria should not be earning as or participating as actively as India is when it comes to the international outsourcing market. However, there are other issues there like culture and so on that will be scaled. But what it is, we found out that look, if so much of government service is still paper-based, right, then there is a market for an onshore outsourcing. In other words, not necessarily trying to target businesses from the US and other advanced countries, but moving government businesses, into privately supported organizations. And so the innovation that needs to happen here is around one, government reorganizing its internal processes, building capacity within government, to be able to operate in that new environment, building capacity of service providers or job seekers. One of the areas that we identified earlier on was the youth, particularly those in high school. So in Nigeria, unlike in most advanced countries where there's flexibility in the education system, you can work and go to school. It doesn't happen like that, and I don't know if that is the case with other African countries. So we identified it as a major problem when it comes to enabling youth to pick up skills, while they are learning and even earning or working through school. So they need, to tweak some policy and practices around creating more flexibility because you can imagine that, for instance, you have these learning platforms that some young people who are in high school who will want to avail themselves of these skills. But if you do that and you can't work because maybe there's age restriction to holding formal jobs, or the learning environment or the school system would not allow you to work and go to school, then we don't solve the problem. Right. So that kind of innovation in processes, in innovation around even the education system is important, right? Because I found out that Nigeria is one of those countries where the average age where people begin to look for their first job is about 24, 25. Compared with their counterparts in the US, that is late.
Yeah.
That is late. All right. So, and doing that, we think that through government technology alone, through the onshore outsourcing, we can create up to 1 million jobs, particularly for young people who are either in school or just out of school. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think right. I'm gonna try to be brief for this one. I think for me, and this is again goes with those principles that I told you about of inclusivity, scalability, and sustainability of ownership. Government, is the primary agent of change. Be it local government, national, all of that. I think all of us other stakeholders can only, that we come in to suggest, to support, and all of this, but it's the onus is really on the government to look at what's happening in their area and how do we make this better. And I think many governments are trying to do this, even with limited resources. So I think that's something that's positive. And you gave some good examples. One other example that I can think of is in Rwanda, for instance, looking at this aspect of how do we modernize our education. Everyone keeps saying our education is outdated. How do we start taking the steps towards, defining it for ourselves, making it work for this new normal that we find ourselves in? And one of the things I did is creating this school called the Ronda Coding Academy. And this is like a model school that takes students who are, I don't know what the equivalent is in Nigeria, but they're 15, so they're finishing the what we call ordinary level in high school. So they're about 15, and these are kids who are young people who are very good at math, good at physics, all these other subjects, who have some sort of passion for computer science and understanding, this whole coding, web development world. And what they did is like a cohort of these young people, and then basically try a new way of teaching. Instead of having them go through 3 years of A levels where they'll take math, physics, chemistry or something, and then go 4 years or so for computer science in college, what they're doing is teaching them immediately, directly, computer science and web development, right? So they're already kind of, their motto is almost like, how do we, empower the kids who are kind of like born to code, so that even by the time they're done with high school, this is 18, 19 years old, they're literal, digital entrepreneurs who will be like, I'm going to work now, go to university later, and they're able to do that because they have the skills. No, seriously, because they have the skills to do it. And maybe this is how we start kind of breaking down this whole, mental model of you need 12 years of primary and secondary school, 4 years of university, and maybe even more, to be able to feel qualified, or because like I said, this world is changing those qualifications and being called into question. So how do we start now looking, because governments have the leeway to be innovative and try something like this, so this is something that's under trial. It's a model school that exists in Rwanda. You can look it up online. It's very interesting. But I'm pretty sure that if it works and they see the outcome, the other thing they're doing, that they're making their curriculum, it's not just the usual take those. It's very demand driven, right? They're literally saying, you people who are leaders in the private sector, you people who are in the private sector, tell the curriculum should be about, right? And that's how you go about making things actually, demand driven and addressing head on this skills mismatch that we all keep talking about, right? And no one else has almost the power to do that more than government, right? People can create almost like parallel scaffolding around this sick education system, if I can call it that, or deficient education system. But it's almost like what is required is to break down the whole thing, right? Obviously, you're not going to do it recklessly, put everyone out of school, but how do you start creating these models so that increasingly they replace what we know now as education, and we know that it's not working for us? Yeah.
You're right. Thank you very much.
There's one more question. So, Jessica, you have a good point about the fact that the ownership lays back on the government. That's interesting. But someone in the room, Ilunga Panyana, asked the question, or she said, what role can the private sector play in building skills for the youth?
Yeah. Question. And I think it's if you look back for so long, the education system itself has not pulled in the private sector as much as it should, right? So that's where it would be very kind of like supply-based, we're going to teach what we know we've taught for 20 years, which is creating the problem that I was talking about right now, right? And in terms of the role of the private sector, I think the private sector is increasingly recognizing, right, that it's important, because even for them, there's some studies that show, they surveyed some private sector employers who said something between, I can't remember exactly the statistics, either it was like 21 or 41% of them said the fact that they have employers that don't know their job actually negatively affects their business. So I think this is something that they're acutely aware of, but maybe there hasn't been as much room for them to be part of this conversation as before. So then, I guess it's not that like a matter of blaming one or the other, but going forward, like I was saying, in this new normal that we want to create, how do we even create incentives for private sector to take in interns and apprenticeships, make this something more prestigious, make them, provide some sort of incentives or tax breaks or something for employers and the private sector that are actively trying to do this, right? And promote things like, instead of them hiring someone from outside, or if they have to hire someone from outside, let them, because that skill is not existent in the country, let's, one of the asterisks of that hiring be you have to second, or you have to have someone attached to you who you're teaching these skills, so that by the time you leave and go back to your country, we actually, are sure that the skills are going to stay back, right? So these are, some countries have to some extent implemented some of these policies, but I don't think they're comprehensive enough, or that it has kind of been done on a larger scale for this to be almost like a movement. But I think definitely the role of the private sector is almost as important as, because again, supply and demand, right? Like you need to have them part of the conversation, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to be, absorbing these people in their businesses. So I think that's what I would say. More collaboration going forward, and maybe this could be, I think just policies, and even when you're designing projects, making sure that, at least for us, that was one of the biggest aspect that we had to consider, making sure that the private sector is with us all the way. But because you sometimes kind of like go into the skilling, because in a way it's almost, skilling is almost like the easy thing, or at least it seems like the easy thing, because the students are there, it's like 1 + 1 = 2, right? The aspect of bringing in the private sector sometimes makes the conversation a bit more complex, because now there's so many other factors you need to, but it's an important and crucial one, because without them, then we're just talking to yourself, basically. Yeah.
All right. Okay. With questions, I guess somebody's picking up.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, fine. If we're done with the question, Jessica, I want to say thank you for a fabulous presentation. I must say the truth, I'm not how will I say, it's been a fabulous presentation, I must say, and I'm sure more questions are going to come. I've added you. I'm going to ask you questions, especially of this live session. We have over 100 something persons on the group who are just waiting for the recording. I don't know why they don't like coming on the live.
Yeah.
It's been a wonderful presentation, and I want to thank everybody who has been a part of this evening session. Bernard, and especially those who have been regular. Bernard, Niles, as well, are back over there in the US. Mora, Mr. Victor, and Anaba. I'm asking questions today because I know you usually do have questions. And Mr. Manuel, Olga, Williams, and for those who have dropped off along the line, I want to say thank you for this evening. Let's keep the
and Mr. Kingsley.
into your head later on. Feel
Oh, things are breaking.
Kingsley too. Very Mr. James is Labs still on, and Yvonne I think has dropped out along the line. And James and Yvonne eventually will be facilitating the training for code for employment platform. They're the ones who will be facilitating training. So I'm sure I'm going to introduce them to you later on. I hope you'll be a part of this committee because we keep the conversation going on. Next we'll have another guest speaker, and I guess that's all I have to now. And we'll keep talking after now. Now, do you have anything to say? Niles, I'm waiting for you. Hello, Niles. Can you hear me, Niles?
I'm here. Yes, I can. All I want to say is thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a good one, everybody.
Yeah. No, thanks for your engaging question. This was great.
Thank you, Jessica. I look forward to engaging with you further.
So I'm gonna still keep talking with you, Jessica.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.